My name is Marcus, and I'm about to tell you the most unbelievable story of my life. It all started on a cold February morning in 2002 in downtown Chicago. The wind was cutting through the streets like a knife, and I remember pulling my coat tighter as I walked into the law offices of Henderson and Associates. I was 24 years old, fresh out of college, and still processing the fact that my mother, Sarah, had passed away just 2 weeks earlier from cancer. The grief was overwhelming, but what I didn't know was that the worst was yet to come. The lawyer's office was intimidating. Dark wood paneling, rows of legal books, and a massive mahogany desk. Mr. Henderson, a man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, gestured for me to sit down. My Aunt Victoria was there too, my mother's older sister, wearing an expensive black dress and pearls. "Thank you both for coming," Mr. Henderson began. "We're here today to read the last will and testament of Sarah Michelle Thompson." He opened a manila folder and pulled out several documents. This will was executed on November 15th, 2001, just 3 months before Mrs. Thompson's passing. My mother and I had been close. She'd raised me alone after my father left when I was 8. She worked 2 jobs to put me through school, sacrificing everything for my future. "The will is quite straightforward," Mr. Henderson continued. "After careful consideration, Sarah Michelle Thompson leaves her entire estate, including the family home at 1247 Maple Street, her life insurance policy valued at $150,000, her retirement accounts totaling approximately $85,000, and all personal belongings to her sister, Victoria Marie Patterson." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to stammer. Aunt Victoria didn't even look at me. She just nodded solemnly and said, "Sarah was always practical. She knew I could manage the estate properly." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "There is one provision for Marcus Thompson. Your mother left you her collection of books and a personal letter." "Books? After everything we'd been through together, she left me books?" "This can't be right," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "There has to be some mistake." "I'm afraid not," Mr. Henderson replied. "The will is ironclad. Your mother was of sound mind and made these decisions freely. I felt like I was drowning. This was the woman who had barely spoken to my mother in the last 5 years, who had criticized every decision Mom made. "Can I contest this?" I asked desperately. He shook his head. "I'm sorry, Marcus." I rushed out of the office. On the street, I leaned against a lamppost, trying to catch my breath. The Chicago wind felt even colder now. When I finally made it back to my small apartment, I opened the letter with trembling hands. "My dearest Marcus." It began in my mother's careful handwriting. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've just learned about my will. I know you must be confused and hurt, and I'm sorry for that. I had to stop reading. The tears were coming too fast. I want you to know that everything I did was for you. Trust me, my son. Trust that I knew what I was doing. Keep the books I left you, especially the old family Bible. It was your great-grandmother's. Inside, you'll find more than just words." That night, I went through the collection of books. There at the bottom was the old family Bible, a thick, leather-bound book with pages yellowed by age. I flipped through it carefully, and there, tucked between the pages of Genesis, I found something that made my heart skip a beat. It was a photocopy of a document, what looked like a will, but not the one I'd heard read in the lawyer's office. This document was dated 6 months before the will that had been read, and in it, my mother left everything to me. Everything. There was even a note in the margin in my mother's handwriting. "If anything happens to me before I can change this back, Marcus, know that you are my sole heir. The later will is not what it seems." My hands were shaking. What did this mean? Had someone forced my mother to change her will? By morning, I had made a decision. I was going to fight this, no matter what it cost me. The next few years were the hardest of my life. I was starting my career as a high school history teacher in Chicago, making barely enough to cover my rent and student loans. Meanwhile, Aunt Victoria was living in my childhood home, making expensive renovations. I tried several times to hire lawyers to help me contest the will, but each consultation ended the same way. They would look at the photocopy from the Bible and shake their heads. "This isn't enough," they would say. "We need the original document or some proof that the later will was forged." One lawyer was particularly honest. "Marcus, I believe you. Something about this situation doesn't feel right, but belief isn't enough in a court of law. We need concrete evidence." The worst part was watching Aunt Victoria at family gatherings. She would act like nothing had happened, offer to help me with money, my own money, and talk about how well she was maintaining Sarah's house. I remember one painful Thanksgiving dinner in 2004. Victoria had invited the extended family to the house and was playing the gracious hostess. She'd redecorated completely, replacing my mother's comfortable furniture with expensive pieces. "Marcus teaches high school now," she announced to the relatives, her tone slightly condescending. "It's so admirable, working with young people." That evening she showed off the new kitchen. "Sarah would have loved it," she said. That comment hit me like a slap. My mother had loved that kitchen exactly as it was. She'd cooked thousands of meals there, helped me with homework at the old wooden table. Over the years, I threw myself into teaching. I loved working with teenagers, but even in my happiest moments, there was always this underlying sadness. In 2008, the economy crashed, and I struggled financially. There were months when I had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. Meanwhile, Victoria was taking expensive vacations with my mother's life insurance money. In 2010, I hired a private investigator. I'd saved for months, eating nothing but peanut butter sandwiches, to afford even a few hours of professional investigation. But he came up empty-handed. "Everyone says your mother was mentally sharp right until the end," he reported. If Victoria was pressuring her, she was very subtle about it. By 2015, I had largely given up on the legal fight. I was 37, still single, still teaching, still living paycheck to paycheck. I focused on being a good teacher and tried to honor my mother's memory by living the values she'd taught me. But late at night, I would sometimes research inheritance law online, always hoping I'd find some new angle I hadn't considered. 18 years. That's how long it had been since that devastating day in Mr. Henderson's office. It was now 2020, and I was 42 years old, teaching remotely during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a Tuesday night in late October when my phone rang at 11:47 p.m. "Is this Marcus Thompson?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional but urgent. "Yes, this is Marcus. Who's calling?" "My name is David Chen, and I'm an attorney here in Chicago. I'm very sorry to be calling so late, but I have some urgent information regarding your mother's estate that I believe you need to hear immediately." My heart started pounding. "I'm listening." "Mr. Thompson, I've been going through the files of a recently deceased colleague, and I've discovered some documents that I believe show your mother's will was fraudulent. I think you may have been the victim of a very sophisticated scheme." I barely slept that night. The next morning, I drove to David Chen's office. He was younger than I'd expected, with kind eyes and a serious expression. "What I'm about to show you came from the files of Harold Morrison, who passed away last month. Mr. Morrison was your Aunt Victoria's personal attorney for over 20 years. He opened a file folder. When Mr. Morrison's family asked me to help settle his affairs, they discovered he had kept detailed records of certain questionable transactions. Your case was among them. David handed me a document, a copy of my mother's original will, the real one that left everything to me. But this copy had something the photocopy didn't have, a letter in Harold Morrison's handwriting. The letter was dated December 2001. In it, Morrison wrote, "Victoria Patterson has made it clear that she expects to inherit her sister's estate. She's offered me a substantial sum to ensure this happens. Against my better judgment, I've agreed to draft a second will. I've convinced Sarah Thompson that she needs to protect Marcus by placing the inheritance in Victoria's hands temporarily. Sarah believes Victoria will honor this arrangement. I know Victoria has no intention of giving Marcus anything. God forgive me." I stared at the letter, reading it over and over. My hands were shaking. "There's more," David said. He showed me bank records indicating Morrison had received $50,000 from Victoria just weeks after my mother's death. "This is evidence of fraud," I whispered. "Victoria lied to my mother." David nodded. "It gets worse." He showed me medical records. "Your mother was on strong pain medications in her final weeks. Morrison used this to argue that she wasn't thinking clearly when she expressed doubts about the arrangement." I felt sick. My mother had died thinking she was protecting me, not knowing Victoria had no intention of ever giving me my inheritance. "With this evidence," David said, "I believe we can not only recover your original inheritance, but also pursue damages for the 18 years of lost income." How much are we talking about? Conservatively, with 18 years of investment growth and interest, we're looking at well over $500,000. I felt dizzy. That was more money than I'd made in my entire teaching career. The legal battle was intense but swift. Morrison's documents were a smoking gun that made Victoria's defense nearly impossible. When we filed the motion to reopen my mother's estate, Victoria's lawyer advised her to settle. But Victoria refused to go down without a fight. She hired an expensive law firm and tried to argue that Morrison's documents were fabricated. The turning point came during Victoria's deposition. When David presented her with copies of the bank transfers to Morrison, her composure finally cracked. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising. "Marcus was just a child. Sarah wasn't thinking clearly. Someone had to protect the family's assets." "Protect them from whom?" David asked calmly. "From him. Sarah spoiled him, filled his head with unrealistic expectations. I was trying to teach him responsibility." "By stealing his inheritance?" Victoria had essentially admitted that she never intended to give me the money. The case made local news. The settlement negotiations took months, but Victoria's lawyers knew they couldn't win at trial. In the end, we agreed to a settlement that gave me everything: the original inheritance plus 18 years of compound interest, the current value of the house, and additional damages. The total amount was $847,000. I'll never forget the day I received that check. It represented not just money, but vindication. My mother hadn't abandoned me. Victoria had to sell the house to pay the settlement. At the closing, she looked older, frailer. "I hope you're satisfied," she said to me. "I'm not satisfied," I replied honestly. "I'm relieved there's a difference." With the settlement money, I bought a beautiful Victorian home with a large kitchen where I could cook meals the way my mother taught me. I also started a scholarship fund in my mother's name for students whose parents work multiple jobs. I wrote a book about my experience called Stolen Legacy: How I Fought for 18 Years to Reclaim My Inheritance. It became a bestseller, helping other victims of similar fraud. The book's success led to speaking engagements and consulting work. I began helping other families navigate inheritance disputes. It felt like my true calling. I also met Lisa at a book signing. She was a social worker who specialized in helping elderly clients protect themselves from financial exploitation. We were married 2 years ago in my backyard. Victoria and I haven't spoken since the settlement. I heard she moved to Florida, struggling financially. I don't feel guilty about that. She made her choices 18 years ago. I still have the old family Bible where I first discovered the clue that set everything in motion. It sits on my bookshelf next to my published book and photos of students I've helped over the years. Recently, a former student sent me a note. "Mr. Thompson, you taught us that history isn't just about memorizing dates. It's about understanding how the past shapes the present. Thank you for showing us that truth always finds a way to surface, even when it takes 18 years. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Morrison had never kept those documents, if that phone call had never come. But I've learned that life has a way of bringing truth to light. Today, I'm not just financially secure, I'm emotionally whole. I know that my mother loved me, that she tried to provide for me, and that justice, though delayed, ultimately prevailed." The midnight phone call reminded me of something my mother used to say: "Marcus, the truth has a way of working itself out." You just have to be patient and keep doing the right thing." She was right. The truth did work itself out. It just took 18 years, one corrupt lawyer's guilty conscience, and a dedicated attorney who believed in justice.